it's just starting. So good morning, everyone. My name is Christoph Lutteroth. I'm the director of REVERE, the research group about virtual reality here at Bath. And it's our pleasure to welcome Dorothy Cowie this morning, who is an associate professor in psychology at Durham University and working a lot with children in VR. And she's giving an exciting talk this morning called Virtual Little Me, Children's Embodiment in VR. And now over to you, Dorothy.
Hi there. So thank you very much for having me. I've just seen another familiar face pop up there, which is Talia. Hello, Talia. I'd forgotten you were in Bath as well. So hi. So thank you so much for having me. I'm Gavin. Hello. Lots of people here. Good. So yes, it's interesting to me to be asked to talk about VR because it's something that I think I've only been getting into really in the last few years. But I feel I'm kind of in the VR camp now. So I'm going to share a little bit, I guess, of just the experience that I've been through this morning and hopefully give you some kind of things to think about if you're maybe using it yourself. So I'm going to just share a presentation with you and I'm going to be skipping in and out to show you some videos as well. And I hope that that works not too badly on Zoom. So I'll just start here. Right. So I'm going to be talking to you about children's embodiment in VR. And the way that I came into VR was thinking about motor control and body representation. So my theoretical aims are to understand how motor control is acquired in development and also how the body is represented in childhood. And specifically what I want to do there is pick apart how children use both multisensory information and prior knowledge to establish a sense of embodiment, that this body is mine and belongs to me and I can control it. And a fundamental problem in studying these topics is that, as William James told us over 100 years ago now, there is the feeling of the same old body always there. So unlike studying, say, if you were studying audition, you could at will play some sounds or not play some sounds or change the pitch or the volume of those sounds. When you're studying the body, of course, I can't just modify my body at will and I can't modify my participant's body at will. So how do we manipulate the body and how do we have control over the sensory and semantic features of it? And so actually that's where VR comes in, because one way that we can use VR is to present people with a body which is perhaps different from their own in certain ways, but nevertheless it's a moving body. And to me this is very important. I believe in studying cognition in a sort of ecological way where we can have people at minimum move around and interact with their environment as they normally would. And VR actually gives us the chance to manipulate a body, but unlike some static things like the rubber hand illusion on a table, we can have someone actually moving and interacting with their environment. And so I think VR is potentially a really powerful tool for helping me achieve some of my theoretical aims, and that's sort of how I've got into it. But of course it's interesting in its own right as well. So the first time I ever tried using VR with children, what happened was some of my computing collaborators gave me a headset and we put it on a child, I think a child participant that I was testing for a different experiment. And we showed them a little demo, and in the demo, the scene moved. And of course, I should have known this, but children are more sensitive than adults to visual cues for balance. So what happened was the child fell backwards into me. And that was my first experience of using VR with children. So the first thing I will say is if you're ever using VR with children, if it's something that you maybe haven't tried yet, but you're wondering about doing, always have an experimenter standing nearby that they can possibly catch the child if they need to, or they can hold a cable, because children are going to be quite sensitive to if you move the scene for them. So watch out. And this is a picture of the old, PowerPoint is annoying me here, hang on. Yeah, so this is a picture of the old swinging room experiments. which were some of the first experiments in the 1970s to show that if you moved a scene around a toddler, the toddler actually falls over. So that's lesson one. So with that in mind, I'll just tell you a little bit about a sort of rough guide, I suppose, to using VR with children first. So we have a large space that we use to do this. So we have a 16 camera motion capture system. So my background, I was just telling Christoph, is actually motion capture with children. And I started looking at motor control with children, my PhD, using this. And it allows us to get sort of fine-grained kinematic measures of movement, speed, velocity, and so on. So we have a 16 camera motion capture system, and we use that to capture the movement of small markers which we place on the participant's body. This is an adult, but we do the same with children, and these are clusters of markers that we put all over the body from the feet to the head. On the head we have an Oculus Rift headset, and the Oculus Rift headset also has these markers on it so that we can track head movement and incorporate that into our system. So these are the sort of bits of hardware, what they look like. And then this is our kind of flow through the system and through the software as well. So this is my daughter, Julia, who Karen will recognize vaguely. She was a lot smaller when you last saw her. So she's wearing all her clusters here and her headset. And we feed that into, this is a piece of software made by Vicon, who make our cameras. The software is called Pegasus, and the software picks up on the movement of those markers and maps those markers to an avatar, such that in pretty much real time, as the participant moves, the avatar moves as well. And we then pick that avatar up and we place that in Unity. I'm sorry about my notifications here. Place that in Unity, and we have a more sophisticated avatar in Unity. And so here's our child size avatar, and we can vary the size of those avatars, which I'll actually show you in a minute. But then we have this avatar in Unity, which is moving at the same time as the participant, but that's then placed within a richer, more immersive environment as well. So that's our kind of workflow through the system. And oh yes, so that's one workflow. Another alternative, I told you I don't know this talk, what's coming next. So another alternative is actually to, if you don't want whole body tracking, for example, in this experiment, we're actually just looking at the hand. So what we can do here is just have someone wear their Oculus Rift headset and hold an Oculus touch controller. And the touch controller it kind of fits into the palm, and it allows you to move your hand a little bit like a paw. And children can hold this and move it around. This is very easy to set up. So this is actually a picture of a child in one of the big science museums in Newcastle, near where we are. So we go into the science museum, or before COVID, we would go into the science museum and basically spend the week there just eating crisps and frantically collecting data. And, you know, this has an advantage of being really commercially available, easy transportable, and easy to set up for people, but it will only give you tracking of the hand. So I think at that point, what I was going to do, is I was going to show you some videos. So I'll show you first a video of some of our full body setups, and then of some of our hand setups. I think I'm doing okay for time. Right, so let me stop sharing this. And I'll share this other screen with you. Okay, so this is an experiment where, again, that's an adult, but we did the same with children, full body tracking, and we're having people move and watch an avatar in the mirror that moves synchronously. And what we did with this setup was we had a normal condition, which is what you're watching now. We also had an asynchronous condition, which I won't show you, but it was a pre-recording. And we also had some other fun conditions, which I will show you. So in this condition, for the participant, the hardware is the same, but when they go in the scene, we've made their body smaller. And we leave familiar size cues in here so they can see the tables and the cups and so on, but their body appears to be small compared to the environment. And of course, the interesting question to ask is, do they feel that their body has shrunk, or do they feel that the environment has grown? And actually the answer is that they feel the environment has grown. We've also got the converse, where we give them a large body. I'll show you that really briefly. So now they're a giant. And actually in this condition, adults just feel that the environment has shrunk, but children in this condition feel like their body has grown. So it seems like there's a bit of an asymmetry, that children feel that their body can grow and adults don't, and neither of them feel their body can shrink very much. So that's fun. I'll just show you the moving hands as well. Videos are coming at you thick and fast now. Let's just start this off. Got it. So we've got various parameters we can adjust at the start in this program. This is a program that's made for us by Harry Brenton, who's Bespoke VR. He did a fantastic job for us. And so we have this very immersive funfair environment. Of course, the children are like, can I go on the Ferris wheel? No, please stay where you are, because there are cables dragging from behind them. But they have this virtual hand and they're touching a series of balls that light up. And we're currently doing some experiments varying the form of this hand and the movement synchrony that it has. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what these setups actually look like. So, whoops. Okay, so what has VR done for us so far? So we've found some things out. We found that for adults, their level of embodiment changes quite substantially with the sort of dose of movement that we give them in virtual reality. They tend to assume at first that the body that they see belongs to them, and actually giving them synchronous movement doesn't change that a lot. But if they see that the movement of the virtual body does not match theirs, then their sense of embodiment really drops off and they start to feel that body is not theirs. So there are questions that we can ask theoretically about the role of visual perspective versus the role of movement, which VR has helped us answer. I told you a little bit already about kids' embodiment of different body sizes and how the size of the body and the size of the environment seem to trade off against each other. Kids, we had a really interesting result, which is that when a child is watching a body that's moving out of synchrony with their own, a full body in an immersive scene, they still rate that body as belonging to them. Now, bear in mind, they're seeing this body from a first-person perspective, so there are cues to tell them that the body belongs to them and its form is correct as well. But we're trying to follow this result up at the minute because we think that's a really interesting one. In a slightly less, I suppose, rich setup, which is actually the fairground I showed you before, where you're only looking at a hand. In that case, children are definitely sensitive to the synchrony of the hand movement, and they embody hands more when they're moving synchronously than when they're not, and we're following that up in various ways now. So there's lots and lots of follow-ups for us to do here, and we've only really just got started with looking at the form of the body and how the body might be able to change shape or texture and what effect that would have on your embodiment of it. So that's something that we're trying to work on despite COVID. I wanted to sort of finish with a few technical challenges, and some of you may have come across these yourselves already. Anyone who hasn't tried this themselves yet, this is what you'll come across if you do try it. So maybe this is a useful kind of hit list for you. So one is hand tracking. So in interacting with the environment, we use our hands, and some famous studies with infants have shown that the hands are in your visual scene like some huge proportion of the time, like 70% of the time. So we really would like to be able to track the hands with some precision, but that is difficult. So far, we have tracked the hand really as a paw, so the fingers can't really individuate and move. The best so there's some hand tracking coming online with the Oculus Quest at the minute, which is okay. The best device probably for doing it so far is the Leap Motion, which is a small, actually really cheap controller you can get that fixes onto the front of an Oculus headset. I pray for the day when there will be good, easily available, easily integrated hand tracking in these systems, because I think it's going to make a big difference to what we can do and how we can interact with objects in the environment, which I said I think is really important. Another aspect of that is haptics. So actually the Leap now has a system called the Ultra Leap where they're incorporating haptics into their setup, and that will enable, more realistic interaction with the environment as well. Another limit is field of view. So the headsets that we use are necessarily limited in their field of view. And that means that if we want to give people a view of their body looking down on it, we often have to have them kind of sort of try and demonstrate, sort of kind of sat back like this, because otherwise the scene simply cuts off here. So wider field of view, would be helpful. Otherwise you have to be careful how you position your participants. We like to interface with some other systems. So there's a sort of big move at the minute of thinking about how embodiment ties into interoception, so awareness of one's own internal bodily states. And for that, we might want to measure heart rate. We might want to provide a virtual threat to the body and see how the body responds to that. So we need to be able to interface with those systems. There's some kind of human resources issues. So it's hard to find programmers who know psychology, how to design psychology experiments. And it's hard to find psychologists who know how to program. So there's a very sweet spot in the middle, where programmers and psychologists can talk to each other, or where you get people who have both those skill sets. And if anyone out there has both those skill sets, please come to my lab. And then just finally, of course, it's interesting to think about the social effects of what we're doing in VR. So people have been talking recently about the Proteus effect. So where you start to behave in ways that are congruent with the characters you inhabit. And that's, of course, something really important to think about for kids as well as adults. And potentially something positive where we can think about educating children on particularly interesting issues. There are people who've been educating them on climate change, for example, and using VR to do that, and having the VR having an after effect after you come out of the experience. So yeah, actually this came up on my Twitter feed last week. It's a nice article from New York Times looking at how you can use VR in a variety of educational ways with children. So I do think that this is a coming thing. Part of that is understanding kids' sensory experiences of VR and their experience of their own embodiment within the scene. And so I hope we have something to offer to that kind of debate, but I think it is something that's a coming thing. So join in. And I just wanted to thank Jana Gottwald and Hayley Dew, my postdocs, Rachel and Sam, PhD students, Laura, who's an RA, who's now doing a PhD, our kind of technical collaborators, so Vicon, who provide motion tracking, Harry, or Bespoke VR, programmer here at Durham, who's amazing, Simon Thurlbeck, my computing collaborator, Marco Gillies in Goldsmiths, and last but not least, the ESRC for funding us so far. And thank you very much for listening. I'll be very happy to chat to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy, for the nice talk. Now it's time for questions. So if you've got any questions, you feel free to either ask them in person, so unmute your microphone, ask them in person, or you can also put them into the chat if you like. Have we got any questions?
I have a question. So like, it's interesting that you found the children, sorry, I have two computers, so I was looking the other way. It's interesting that you find that children still embody despite seeing the body moving asynchronously. And I wonder, based, on study out there and also that I've done also with Marco, whether is because they have a bigger window of, synchrony perception, in the sense that they are less sensitive and they keep keep perceiving them as synchrony for larger delays.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether you had just one set asynchronous movement and delay, or whether you had a series of them and whether it broke down at some point or not.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So I really must learn this for talks to know like what is the temporal binding window for children, but people have done it. But basically, I suspect that there is an effect where you increase the lag of the visual motor lag, and it gradually breaks embodiment. And in fact, we have built into our program the ability to do that, but we haven't had the chance to run it yet. However, this condition, because it was like experiment 1, the lag was huge. I mean, huge. So it wasn't that. Actually, what we had the children do was the hokey cokey. Are we all familiar with the hokey cokey by now?
No, tell me what.
We haven't been to enough children's parties yet. So it's a game that is played at British children's parties, where exactly the man here is demonstrating, Leon is demonstrating for us. So you put your right arm in, your right arm out, your left arm in, your left arm out, and then the same with the legs. And we did it because it's something that children are familiar with. So in the async condition, literally the avatar was moving their hand and the child was moving his leg.
Oh, okay. So it was more about a mismatch than just.
It was a total. Yeah, it was like we took the track and did like 180-degree phase shift. But I am interested as well in looking at the finer grained like influence of delay, and that's something I would like as soon as we get back from COVID. Is one of the experiments on my list to do. Yeah, no, that is really interesting then, because it's actually a mismatch on what they were doing with the person more than a temporal desynchronization. It's spatial. I mean, it's the same as, like in the rubber hand illusion, we've always done like a spatial mismatch as well as temporal. So it's a spatial and temporal mismatch. Is completely off, but still they say they embody it. So actually what we are doing is building in some skin conductance. So we're going to like threaten the virtual body and see if the skin conductance response really comes up even in the asynchronous condition. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you.
Hi there, Christopher.
Any other questions?
Hello, sorry. Great talk, Dorothy. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I was really interested when at the start you mentioned how the child fell back because they were out of balance. Do children suffer from cybersickness more in virtual reality compared to adults?
So I don't think anyone has as far as I can see, there isn't a huge amount of evidence on it. I mean, that I would expect that there might be a little, but that was weird because we moved the scene. I mean, usually if you keep it such that, the scene movement is congruent with their head movement, we have not found kids complaining. And that's actually across, I mean, I've been running these embodiment experiments, but then as Karen will know, my husband also runs experiments on spatial cognition, and they like teleport kids and stuff. They also haven't had kids complaining, maybe like 1 in 5 years. So
I can add to that, like in the study of the spatial cognition, where we had the children have even a situation where they see the visual information but they don't move. They again tend to do this even more than adults. But while we had adults feel sick, sometimes children never did. So it looks like they are actually less sensitive. This based on experience. We didn't test that, but based on experience, like Dorothy says, we found that they are really okay with it.
Yeah. Gavin.
Hi, Dorothy. That was really interesting. Thanks for that. I have a slightly boring technical question, I guess. With working with kids, what adjustments do you have to make to the headsets to make it work with their tiny heads and their close together eyes and things like that?
Yeah, so we haven't done any adjustment of, I mean, I guess the distance between the eyes is slightly different. What have we done? What have we done? I couldn't actually answer that. I feel like there is possibly something in the headset that someone adjusted many years ago, but otherwise I don't know. And in terms of getting it to fit on the head, we have like tight straps that work to fit it on. Yeah.
That's encouraging.
I need to check that actually, because I'm sure that there was something at the beginning. I'll check that for you.
I think Leon was first, yes.
Hello.
Hi there.
I was in a meeting that overran before, so I missed the start of your talk. I'm sorry about that. Especially sorry because it was so interesting what I did here. So that means I don't know whether you talked about this. Children seem to have quite an imagination, shall we say? They're used to the kind of play which involves something like investing themselves in often quite crude representations. So to be embodied, I mean, like little Lego characters moving about. I am the Lego character. This is me. I'm moving here and there. So, and that's a kind of a normal. It seems to me, and I'm not an expert at all with children, although I've had some. That's what I'm thinking about. So that's kind of a normal mode of operation, isn't it, for children, and not for adults so much. Do you think that has something to do with how easy it is for them to invest themselves in representations which are desynchronized and in the way that you've described?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, people. So I started off a few years ago looking at embodiment through the rubber hand illusion, and in that illusion, you place a fake hand in front of people, and then you kind of reveal the fake hand to them, and you start stroking it at the same time as their own hand, and people feel like the fake hand is theirs. And I've had the question from people like, oh, didn't you get any kids? Did the kids not get freaked out by this? And my answer has always been, I've never had a child freak out. I have had the odd adult freak out, but never a child. And I think because they are used to, like, everything is novel for them. They are, as you say, they have a good imagination. They live in an imagination land. So I do think that there's probably a certain openness to experience and maybe a plasticity in children that's not quite there in adults.
Or it's disappeared.
Yeah.
I can still invest myself in a Lego character. So, I think I've still got it, but yeah.
There's different ways of talking about embodiment, and you can invest yourself in a Lego character, but you don't. If I pull the arm off the Lego character, you wouldn't wince. So it's partly about, No,
I'd be annoyed, but I wouldn't wince. It's true.
You wouldn't wince. So there's embodiment and there's embodiment. But one of the things, like, really interesting groups that I've started looking at is kids who have limb differences. So kids who are missing a hand, and in that group, the brain rewires itself. Whereas if you lose a hand later in life as an amputee, the brain in general doesn't rewire itself. So there does seem to be some fundamental sensory motor plasticity in childhood that there just isn't in adulthood.
I mean, they don't have phantom limb. Is that what you mean?
They don't seem to have phantom limbs.
Okay.
If you go into the part of the brain where the piece of cortex where the missing hand would normally be represented, in adults, it's kind of still pining for the missing hand, whereas in children who never, in adults who've never had a hand, it's filled with other representations of feet and mouth and torso. So.
All right. Thank you. That was fascinating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pooja.
Hi. Thank you for the talk. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions regarding why children were feeling that the environment shrunk. Have you asked them why they were feeling like that, or have you asked the adults what sort of information they were receiving from the environment so that they were feeling like that?
Well, I guess we haven't asked them in a lot of detail because we wanted to establish the effect first. And actually, we tried initially using like a size estimation task, which I think wasn't wasn't really good enough. So we just went for this quite crude thing of asking them, do you feel like your body has grown? Do you feel like objects in the environment have grown? But I guess just the understanding really is that there must be some kind of trade-off between those two. It has to be one or the other. And we just wanted to understand which it was. And we could probe in some more detail, perhaps the degree of that. I think if we went back to our original task and kind of improved it a bit.
We were doing some research with the basketball players, and we were interested in understanding whether there are some contextual information either from the floor or in terms of basketball, either from the rim or any object in the scene. So that would be interesting to see in adults or children, or
like which objects they're using as reference, you mean?
Yes, either objects or any marking on the floor or on the walls or from the sky or anything.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's this idea of the body as so Sally Linkenauger and Matt Lungo talked about this, the body as a perceptual anchor. So what you're really doing is keeping your body, you're believing that your body is staying the same size and then using actually your body to anchor your perception of the other objects in the room. And we just plonked a load of familiar objects in there deliberately, teacups, tables, cakes. Yeah.
Also, I just had some marks regarding your setups. If you were complaining that the lag was too much, one reason could be that we were trying to daisy chain several systems. For example, for hands, we were using special gloves that were measuring the motion. Whenever we were using, for example, markers to motion capture everything, hands, body, everything, the lag would be significantly lower. Also, I think Gavin asked something about VR adjustment. For children, we were usually placing a couple of things under their eyes so that they don't receive any feedback from the environment. We were interested in measuring balance. And one of the reasons was that they were using this information that they were seeing from the corner of their eyes.
Yeah, we have also some little inserts here.
Yeah. Also related to cybersickness, there's also two different things. One measurement for cybersickness would be subjective, whether asking the person, "Are you feeling sick?" or "Would you like to stop?" And then the other one would be objective, that would be measuring, for example, if they are losing their balance by using force plates. And most of the time, there is no correlation between these two. So I'm thinking that since kids don't know anything about cybersickness or getting sick from the VR, probably their perception of cybersickness would be significantly lower than, for example, adults that are constantly bombarded with this information that, oh, if you are using VR, there is a chance that you are nausea or you're feeling sick. So that would be really interesting to explore, to see if all these subjective and objective measurements are correlated in children. And
yeah, that'd be interesting to explore. I've just seen a question in the chat, which is a very important question from somebody asking what ages these children were. So we've done this from about 5 years upwards, for whoever asked that.
I think we've got one more question. Yes, Janet.
Hi.
Very interesting, thank you. I'm fairly VR naive, so hopefully these are easy questions. You said that the kids were able to embody bigger bodies, but not smaller bodies, and adults couldn't embody either. Hang on, yes, that's right. So that, like, my interpretation of that is that kids are in the process of growing, and especially some kids have quite rapid growth spurts. So suddenly experiencing yourself in a larger body is not an unusual experience while you're a child. Is that your interpretation? Okay,
so my interpretation, yeah.
All right, so then what I was wondering is, in thinking about in terms of the way that your body is changing and that you are used to your body changing in a particular way, has anyone done work looking at whether we are better able to embody a body of someone that looks like sort of like us but a bit older versus like us but a bit younger, for example, or those kinds of things?
So effective age specifically. So the only study really of age that I've come across is a study by Domna Banaku, and she had child avatar and an adult avatar, and she had children embody the adult avatar or adults embody the child avatar. And then she had a kind of social measure afterwards. So she had people like go into, like choose if they wanted to go into a child's playroom or an adult's room afterwards. But that's only really the study that's the only real study I know that's looked at age specifically. And I don't think, oh, well, that's not true. I think Mel Slater has done some mad stuff on adults within a game becoming older and actually even then dying within the game. I'm not sure if that's published yet, but no one's done it like looking at kids gradually aging, and it would be really interesting to do.
Okay, thanks.
We've got another question in the chat about ethical considerations for children as young as 5.
Yeah, thank you, Talia. So, I mean, I think by the time I started doing this, I had let Karen and Marco and others do the hard work already of bringing children into VR. And I had seen in the lab that it was okay, you know, that kids were not complaining, they weren't getting sick. I think because we've been doing some quite basic studies that have had no real social implications yet, I don't think there have been any big ethical considerations in that way. We've just been concerned that they're not tripping over wires and they're not feeling sick, and they're not doing either of those. I think it is interesting. A lot of the computing people seem really, really interested in this sort of social side of experiments. And we're going to have to be really careful there to say, you know, if your child has a meaningful experience in VR, we want that to be a positive thing. And we don't want to give them any kind of negative experiences, I think. So we're going to be really careful what kinds of experience we give them, if that makes sense. But it's quite uncharted territory. I mean, the VR companies usually recommend that people, you know, the games are not played until the kids are maybe 12. Mm-hmm. So by going in and doing 5-year-olds, it is a bit of a jump, but we've never had any, you know, parents or kids have any word of complaint about it, basically, which I take as a mum, for me, that I'm happy with that, you know. So I think we're doing okay, but we just got to be careful about what we present them with. I don't know, does that help? Do you think there's anything else that I'm missing in there?
No, I think that's absolutely right. It's something we really struggled with on the ethics committee, is what we can give ethical approval for, where the equipment recommendation is for children above 12. Like, ethically, is it appropriate that we're doing it with younger children? But it's nice to see that it's being done in other places. I read a study once that said that children in VR don't necessarily discriminate between what's happened to them in real life and what's happened in VR. Is that part of the rationale for being really careful with what you present them with?
So I think that's one of the Baylinson studies, is it? There's a big group in Stanford who are really interested in this. And that was something like, there was like a memory study or something like that. So we have to be really careful that if we present something to them in VR, the only effects it might have on them are positive ones, I guess. And the other thing is then to, I guess, thoroughly debrief people afterwards as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Such interesting work. So jealous.
Fun stuff.
Bjorn has another question, yes?
Microphone down. Yeah, it's following up on that, really. I'd wondered, when you say your children don't experience any difficulties, it's like, well, how do you know? So do you tell them in advance that if you start to feel a bit, if your tummy feels funny? I mean, how do you adapt the way you present your work to them?
So we always do. I mean, honestly, with any study, I have found the best way of getting good data from children and keeping everyone happy is to do quite a long training phase and then bam into the data collection phase. But during the training phase, we'll be, you know, trying this, now try it like this, now try it like this, now carefully put the headset on, now have a go, now take the headset off again, tell us how you feel. So there's quite a long period of faffing around at the start where they're given a lot of opportunity to tell us if they want to continue. And really only when we've got through that phase, then we can in quite a business-like way, get through and kind of collect the data after them. But they're given lots of opportunity at the start to sort of tell us how they're feeling, basically. And the other thing is, like, we tend to work with a participant database here in Durham where the kid will come back multiple times. Now, we wouldn't have them back for 2 studies the same, but they may have been in for a spatial cognition VR study and then an embodiment VR study. And, you know, by coming back again, they're basically telling us that it was all right the first time. And actually the kids, there are certain kids who like doing it, like coming in and kind of bug their parents. Like,
yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah. Yeah. So I'd like to push this a little bit more, if you don't mind. And have you ever have a child say, no, I don't like it?
Yes, very rarely.
But to me, that's encouraging in itself. Do you see what I mean? Because then you know that it's there's something about what you're doing which does allow a child to say, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I did my PhD with motion capture, and you've got to put these little markers on the body. And again, like, I had one child, I think, maybe 2, maybe 1 in my PhD who they just didn't like it. So yes, I mean, I do think they should be free to not do it if they don't want to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody would contradict that, but it's sort of having some confidence that the procedure that you've adopted is in fact suitable, such that they can say no, you know, as a practical matter, that there's nothing about the way things are done that might make them feel that they ought not to, even though they feel that they don't want to carry on.
No,
it's that kind of thing, really. That's what I was trying to get at.
Have, you know, verbal assent from the children. It's not a matter of the parent kind of signing away, like, you know, you are my child for the next hour. We really, and you know, people running these experiments are trained in working with kids, and, you know, trained to be sensitive to the child's mood, you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I'm a parent, so I think my kind of, you know, ground truth is, like, would I be okay if someone was doing this with my kids? And as long as the answer to that is yes, then I feel like I'm ethically doing the right thing, you know.
Well, thank you, Dorothy, for that really interesting and really inspiring talk. It sounds as if there's a lot of work to do still, so it sounds very exciting, and thank you for giving us an insight into some of your work. And also thank you for our audience, for everybody who attended, and for your interesting questions. So that's the end of our talk for today. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again at our next event. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. That's great. Well, thank you so much for having me. That was really interesting.